Today, we give you buys, sells, and holds for the NFC and AFC West. We also read your buys, sells, holds, as well as discussing trades with real players in real leagues. Stick around for all of that and more. And welcome into the Dino Construction Podcast. This is our last recording before real NFL football. We are stoked. I'm your host, Justin, joined as always by David and JP. We are excited to go over our last preseason episode. Of course, as always, we're going to start that off with our community question. And what was our community question last week, where we got answers from the fine folks in the audience, David?
Yeah, we were just asking you guys to name a buy, sell, and hold in the AFC and or NFC West. So, JP, you want to read our first response?
And our first response we have here is from Capacious15. And in the NFC West, his buy is Michael Wilson, sell Deebo Samuel, and hold JSN. And then he gives us an AFC West as well. And he's buying Javonte, selling Lad McConkey, and holding Rashee Rice. And I don't hate those at all, but I'm not going to give away too much because we're going to talk about these players more, obviously. But we also have another response here that I want to read from Taters. And in the NFC, he is buying Deebo, selling Metcalf, and holding Cup. All wide receivers there. Those are guys that are all exciting there. I definitely think it's very dependent. Obviously, with those guys specifically, we're talking about some receivers that are a little bit older. It's all about, I think, what your window is. Are you competing this year? Are you rebuilding? Because I could see selling all three of those wide receivers, Deebo, Metcalf, and Cup, in a rebuild. But also I could see buying them all. Justin, what are the next response that we have?
Yeah, next response, friend of the show, Trav Bob, NFC West buy, tough. JSN if you can get any deal. Don't overpay, but he could take a good spike in value if you can pivot at a decent price. Sell. Also JSN if you got a Hawks fan like Trav Bob, or a Buckeyes fan like David here that is sure he's going to smash, sell him. Hold with caveat. KW3, he can produce quite well. So if you're competing, hold. Or if you're seeing how it goes, then sell. If you completely suck, though, sell, sell, sell. AFC West from Trav. Hold Kelsey. Can't get what he could produce now. Sell Nix. Not sure that great of talent, but he is a starter for Peyton, so maybe can move around with him. And buy Herbert. If you can tier down or trade a lower tier QB for a nominal price, maybe then go get that boy. I agree with that last one. I'm all about getting that boy. Love me some Herbert. JP and I were arguing, as always, while David was trying to mediate before the show about that a little bit. We'll get more into that later on in the episode, and definitely we'll be talking about a few other of those guys as well. And what is our last one, David?
Yeah, from our buddy Kranz, I think Kevin is his name. His buy is Herbert. It says an unknown offense. Roman only produces elite QBs when looking at his past QB stats. It's really cheap right now, and if he balls out with this new coaching staff, his value can explode. Roman talks about letting him run more, so there's more potential for added rushing stats, and he's still super young and proven. His hold is Rashee Rice, second most red zone targets last year, has a Kelsey-esque type of skill to just be open for Mahomes, and Mahomes trusts him already. If he balls out this season, his value will continue to climb, and you can then sell for a boat. And his sell is Puka. You can literally get a haul for him right now if you're not contending. Uncertainty around QB play of Stafford if Stafford retires, and a healthy Cooper Kupp may vulture touchdowns and targets this year, meaning he could lose value. Thank you for all of that input. We definitely appreciate it, and I agree with pretty much all of it.
So, of course, our responses to the community question are going to be pretty much the whole episode. So next week, we're just going to be releasing there's football, a week one recap show. So don't really have a community question for that, because unless you can already tell us what's going to be important to talk about, we don't really know. We're looking forward to bringing back the community questions later on in season when we get into some more strategy episodes later on. But for now, we are going to go ahead and we are excited to hop right into our buys, our sells, and our holds. Sorry, we're going to start with the reigning division champions as well as the reigning NFC champions, the 49ers. JP, who is your buy?
I got to talk about my boy, Brandon Ayuk here. I think there's a lot of great players on this team. They're all valued pretty highly, pretty much all of the top receivers, running backs, tight end, quarterback. So I'm going with Ayuk, who I think is one of the best players in the NFL. And he just got the bag. He's making $30 million a year. He is locked up in San Francisco, which I personally love because Kyle Shanahan, he's going to have a great offense. So he's going to be part of a great offense here for, I'd imagine, the 4 years that he's there. But But we just saw that he had one of the most efficient seasons in NFL history. And usually when you see that, you think regression is going to be coming. And that's what I do expect from a per touch, per target basis, that regression will hit for him. But this is why I don't think you should be afraid to buy Ayuk at his price. And I think proving that he could win a low volume with that crazy efficiency, I think that's a great sign for how good of a player that he really is. But last year, the 49ers, they were dead last in pass attempts. Part of it was because of how efficient that they were on offense. With that being such a low number last season, I think that's bound to come up from dead last in the league, unless they just repeat their dominance from last year. But maybe that means IU continues his efficiency because he's such a great player. But I love that he has contingent upside as well. Because if there's an injury to Debo or Kittle or Christian McCaffrey, I think that his volume probably sees a little bit of a tick up. And all these guys have struggled with injuries at certain points in their career. But last year, they were surprisingly healthy. I kind of doubt that will happen again. Debo, he only missed 2 games. CMC and Kittle only missed 1. That's not the normal for these guys and just NFL players in general. So I think that there's a good chance that one of these guys probably will miss some time. Brandon Ayuk, he's got a legit case to be the league's best route runner. And let me tell you why. And I refer to reception perception database here, of course. But for 2023, Brandon Ayuk in the whole database for 2023, he had the second best man coverage success rate last year behind only A.J. Brown, who was the highest against zone coverage in the whole database from last year. And he was the second best success rate versus press behind only Justin Jefferson. So he's top 2 in all 3 of those coverage types. So that's incredibly impressive. Also, he does everything. I mean, he wins contested balls. He's a good yak player. He blocks his ass off too. That's a lot of fun and adds value to the NFL team. Not our fantasy teams, unfortunately. But in 2025, I think there's a chance that it might be a lot better for Ayuk. I mean, with Purdy, he has to get paid. And it's going to be a real money squeeze because they're going to be paying Kittle top dollar, Debo, CMC, Trent Williams, Nick Bosa, Purdy, and now Ayuk they're paying top dollar. So I think there's a chance that we see maybe Debo leave. I know there's been some speculation. That's not a guarantee, but even if one of these guys doesn't move on and they keep the Avengers all together, CMC and Kittle, they're approaching ages that I think we could see some efficiency start to decline next season. I think they're still good this year, but they're starting to get towards that age where I'm concerned for efficiency. I mean,
all right. So I definitely agree. He's a fantastic NFL player. He's been a solid fantasy player. Right around that wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 turn in production last year. So let's kind of narrow in on what we're willing to pay for him on your high hopes that you have for him. So I'm going to start off with something that I'd certainly say no to. Are you willing to pay 2 mid to late firsts for him?
I think that's getting closer to the A.J. Brown and Puka Nacua 2-year. So maybe not quite that. It's close for me, though.
A first and 2 seconds.
I think I would if I need the receiver help because I just think that he has the Stephon Diggs type of talent where he could make that jump if Debo does move on.
Okay. And let's go kind of between those two. Would you do 2 firsts if you got Ayuk and a second back?
Probably not. Just with the value of this first, I don't think I would do that. But I love Brandon Ayuk, like I just laid out. I definitely would do the first and 2 seconds if I need the receiver help, as long as those seconds weren't like super early.
Not sure I'm paying that much personally. A first and a second I could certainly see, but a first and 2 seconds, that's getting a little pricey for me. I think I'd be shopping around to see what else I can do. I know you love some Ayuk, so can't blame you for getting your guy.
Who are you selling on the Niners?
For me, the obvious answer is going to be CMC. So if I have him, which honestly I don't, I had some last offseason and I got some holes for that boy. But he's ranked above Anthony Richardson on Keep Trade Cut, above Garrett Wilson, Jahmyr Gibbs. What I'm trying to do with him is just wait till he starts going off in season because he's supposed to be playing week 1 in theory. Last reports is he should be healthy, ready to go. Wait till he's going off. Wait till he's scoring points. And I'm doing one of 2 things. If I'm at the running back position, I'm trying to either A, add a little bit to him, second or something like that. See if I can get up to Bijan type of range. See if I can get up to Jahmyr, Brees, one of the young guys, or see if I can tear down off of him for a pretty solid, obviously you're not going to get that type of production, but a solid startable running back in a first at least, which I think once he's scoring 25 points a game, that's pretty viable. Or goodness gracious, if I can tear off of this guy for a A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua type of guy, even parallel, I'm probably doing that just because of the longevity of it. Of course, you're going to regret it on your roster this year from a points perspective, but this guy's going to be playing for a couple more years and he has to hit an age cliff at some point. So it's just an easy sell for me.
I don't know if it's ever easy to sell those points, man.
I'll do it. Both teams I traded last year, I still won chips.
If you're not competing, obviously he's a sell. So let's assume you're competing. Talk about tearing up to Bijan or Brees. I don't think you're doing that for a second. You're going to pay a first to do it because that's Probably more realistic.
Probably not paying a first. At that point, I'm probably looking to tier down to somebody else who's a low end RB1. Probably I'm losing 5 points per game, but trying to get that guy. Let's think somebody like a Kenneth Walker or someone in season. I'm going to look at who's actually performing, in that RB1, RB2 fringe range, probably more in the neighborhood of 17 points a game versus like the 25, 16 points a game. Take a huge hit, take a bath on the points per game, and get a first plus as well. I think that's a viable thing that we're going to see happening in season, and I'll do that. I did that last year with Joe Mixon and a first. That's going to be super early next year. I'm always willing to do it. Maybe I'm dumb, but I win a lot than the average person does. Not more than I lose last year, but this year is possible. We're going to see. I'm going for 50% this year, David. But the point is, I'm always willing to take that risk, get out early versus late.
Fair enough. So would you rather go all the way down there or just take like maybe a second and get Achan or ETN or Jonathan Taylor, someone in that tier?
A second does not sound like a whole lot for me to go down to some of those names. I'd probably be tempted though. I think I'd probably see if I could swing a 1-2 swap or something like that. Some of those names there, Achan, JT, probably taking a second and those players for CMC is good process and a move I should do just because they're so much younger. But I think I would rather aim lower and get the first unless I see those guys are actually smashing in season, in which case I'm not so sure I can actually get that deal done,
Fair enough.
I like firsts. I don't like running backs. Next question.
Yeah, good answer.
All right. And David, who is your hold here?
All right, now let's move on to the second place LA Rams. Justin, who is your buy from this team?
For me, it's a guy I was probably looking to sell earlier this offseason when he was wide receiver 5 on keep trade cut at one point. Puka Nacua. So I know Krenz is selling to me saying, but I think that you can get a haul for him he was talking about. It's kind of sailed a little bit, right? There is a lot more of the fear. There's the Cooper Kupp hype train that's happening. And I mean, he's dropped, several spots on keep trade cut. He's below Marv, which I understand. Garrett Wilson, I know you guys are very high on him. I personally prefer Puka slightly. AJ Brown, pretty close there. I'd probably take Puka as well. And then cross positionally, he's below Jahmyr Gibbs. I would smash Puka there just from the longevity. And then he's also below, of course, 3 other RBs as well. CMC, Brees, Bijan. Well, I probably would prefer Bijan to Puka. I'm not sure about the other guys. I think I'd take Puka over them in a vacuum just because wide receiver longevity and also the potential to be a hammer has shown us he can do it. So for me, I'm pretty interested in Puka.
You're going to pay your 25 and 26 first to buy him? Decent team?
It's a very fair price, and in a vacuum, would I pay 25 and 26 random first? Absolutely. I would pay 2 first for it if I had them to spend. But if those are my only 2 first, I'm probably not looking to give up my flexibility.
That's why I asked about yours, because
do I have someone else's firsts? Because I do that a lot where I'll trade my first as long as I have another one sitting there, sure.
If you just have one between those 2 years, are you doing it? Like whether it's 25 or 26?
I mean, it depends on my depth. If I have enough pieces that I know I can recuperate stuff, but if I'm going to start 10 and I only have 10 starters after making the trade, no, I'm not going to hamstring myself. Of course not.
All right. What if you have an extra first in each year? You're going to add a second?
Probably not on principle because I think I'd rather just see if those 2 firsts can get me AJ Brown at that point and save the second. I think the second's about the fair gap between the two, and I'd rather keep the flexibility, but I think 2 firsts can get it done, and I'm definitely willing to pay that price as long as it doesn't hamstring my team.
I think we probably landed on the price there.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if you were going to ask me what Kyler or Herbert straight up. You had it written down.
I figured I know your answer by now.
Hell nah. And David, who is your sell?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Blake Corum here. He's RB21 on keep trade cut, down a little further at 28 on DLF ADP. He's still ranked ahead of several starters. Most of us, and unless you're talking about the really top guys, we just care about what are you going to do for me this year. I know some of these rookies we try to project a little bit. Look, he's only 3 months younger than Kyron, so it's not like he's going to be taking that role unless they don't pay Kyron. Like I said, he's almost 24. Kyron was just announced as the punt returner for the Rams, and people are kind of overreacting to that a little bit. It might be a big deal, it might not be. He returned some punts last year too. too. So, what I've seen is Kyron is really good at football. He's a really good running back. So I still think he's going to be the guy there. I think Corum right now is just kind of an expensive handcuff, kind of like Zach Charbonnet a couple years ago. I'm trying to sell him while he still has value personally.
Now, would you sell him for Deontay Johnson straight up?
If I'm competing, probably, yeah, I think so.
What about a different running back like David Montgomery?
Yeah, I'd take Montgomery for sure.
And I'll give you one more. What about Jameson Williams?
Come on now, you know the answer. I'm taking Corum, obviously.
Yeah, and when we look at like Charbonnet from last year, Charbonnet was honestly even getting drafted before where Corum is now, right? And Charbonnet still has some imaginary value, sitting on keep trade cut, but trying to move him in a real league is very difficult because unless he actually does something year one, now he's just a guy that we assume is just the RB2 for the entirety of the other guy's contract. So are you taking a random second for him still? I know you said earlier in the offseason you probably would. Are you taking that random second?
It just depends on where my team's at. I think I should be able to get a little more, so I want a little more.
Second and a third?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I agree with you there.
Yeah, I think I'd take any second because he was a late second in rookie draft. So honestly, I'd even consider that.
All right, moving on. JP, who is your hold here?
So this is somebody that I wanted to talk about specifically, and 'cause I've actually thought about this question. Should I move this player where I have a share? That's Jordan Whittington that I think is a hold, actually. Now, this is a guy who was on a lot of waiver wires before training camp. He was pretty off the radar. So if you want to sell him for a third, I mean, I can understand. But where I do have him, I am going to hold because the drumbeat has been consistent through training camp. And he was arguably the most impressive rookie in the preseason. And now I don't think that he's a complete wide receiver, but Sean McVay, we know that he knows how to maximize his players' strengths. I think that if one of the guys between Puka or Cooper Kupp, if they go down, I think that he might have a pretty interesting role that will get people excited, that will get you to be able to get more than a third. And with Puka and Cooper Kupp, they both are guys who have not necessarily had the best health. And Puka, he's only played double-digit games one time in college through 4 years. He was banged up last year as a rookie, and now he's hurt in training camp entering the season now. We think he's going to be ready for week one. Although Dr. Jesse Morris on X, he has some concern because of what they reported this injury to be. It was supposed to be a couple-day recovery, when now it's been a few weeks and he still hasn't really been on the field. But maybe there's being super, super cautious, but he's been a little skeptical of that. And Cooper Kupp, he's 31, hasn't played more than 13 games since 2021. I just think that the odds that both of these guys are healthy all season long are fairly low. And I think that when Jordan Whittington gets on the field, especially if Cooper Kupp goes down and he plays that slot role, I think that he might have some interesting weeks that you can get at least 2/3, maybe even a second when you send a third alongside Jordan Whittington.
If you can't move him for a third now, maybe just hold, and I doubt you could get a third for him. But I think that this guy is just kind of like a probable roster clogger more likely than not. I wouldn't get too attached to the name personally. Just if you can't move him for a profit and you have him because you got him for free, then sure, holding. But I think the realistic thing in almost every situation like this is the guy who is going to be the wide receiver 2 when Kupp leaves, not on the roster. Usually the wide receiver 3s in situations like these, maybe they'll hit occasionally, but I think it's just kind of personally, I'm not super interested unless it's a best ball format.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, like I said, I don't think he's like a fully complete player. I just think that for a couple game sample, I just think that they just use him as a yak guy. And, that gets people excited when they see 1 week of decent production from a rookie.
Definitely isn't a fun offense. The third place Seahawks. David, who is your buy?
Well, it's got to be JSN, right? It is. Look, we knew he was going to have a rough season last year. The injury slowed it down even more. I'm loving this year, though. I know Lockett's still here. We would have liked to see him move on. They got a new OC who should open things up a little bit, run a lot more 3 wide receiver sets, probably use him in a more creative way. He's probably going to outproduce or out-target Lockett this year at the very least. Probably a little bold to predict that he would out-target Metcalf, but I do think it's possible. So, you're going to get used better. You're healthy finally in year 2. You're going to get more targets. Yeah, sign me up, man. I love this guy. I've bought him a couple times this offseason.
I know you have. And would you pay a late first for him straight up?
Yeah, in most situations, for sure.
Would you trade Kenneth Walker for him?
Yeah.
Now, would you trade Michael Pittman for JSN?
I think so, because I'm not a big believer in Pittman's ceiling, but his floor is definitely higher. So I think some teams I'd probably keep Pittman, but I think most of the times I'll gamble on my guy here.
Yeah, I think Pittman is trending down. I'm personally a believer And JSN's talent, I'm a little bit skeptical of his ceiling. I know Justin's a little bit lower, but obviously you're the high guy, and I don't mind if you want to call your shot on a player in this kind of range of wide receivers.
Sometimes you got to call your shot. It's kind of fun to do so, right? Don't always have to go with process.
I mean, I do love me some Xavier Worthy. Trying to buy some right now. I understand the calling your shot. Respect it. Respect it.
All right. And JP, how about your sell here?
Now, I mean, we got the theme of running back sells. It's right on par with our show here, but I'm talking about Kenneth Walker. A lot of it is due to the fact that he's just been steamed up on keep trade cut. He's RB10 right now, and he's only 20 of these magical keep trade cut points behind Saquon and Kyron Williams right now. So by the time this is released, I mean, he might even be RB8 if he inches up just a little bit more, which I think that's just bonkers. Now, this rise is because of reports due to him being used more in the passing game. I might be buying it a little bit, but not too much, because Walker in college and in the NFL has never been a player who's captured a high team target share. So yeah, even if he sees a small bump, I don't know, because Charbonnet, he's a good player as well, and he's a great pass catcher as well as a running back. Charbonnet, I mean, he might be less explosive, but he's more consistent in a game with positive yardage. In the short yardage situations, he's less boomer bust. He falls forward rather than losing yardage. That's without even talking about how they've three great wide receivers, arguably a top 5 trio. I mean, you just talked about JSN. I think he's a talented player. I think Lockett is still, if he's your wide receiver 3, you're doing pretty good, I think, even though he's probably in decline. So it's just hard to see that he's going to get enough targets for this to matter if he really is in a split backfield. And this is also in an offense that we're hoping can bounce back. Last year, this offense was not good. But I do think that a reason I might be a little bit bullish on this offense is because they were dead last in plays last year. And I think that probably will increase. But still, at that price point, I will be selling Kenneth Walker.
All right, so talking about that price point, yeah, I mean, like that RB8, RB10, that sounds amazing. I'm not entirely sure you can get a random first for him. You're taking a random first, right?
Yes.
Are you taking a late first?
Yeah, I would.
2 seconds.
If I'm rebuilding, certainly. But if I'm competing, no.
Devin Singletary in a second, or Zach Moss in a second, someone in that range.
Probably not quite. No, I'd rather keep the flexibility.
Definitely taking any first. Once we get down into the range of multiple seconds, just depends on team need. I think I agree as well. I'd certainly pay 2 seconds for him on some competing teams. Certainly would sell him for 2 seconds on some rebuilding teams. So I think we kind of have it nailed there.
All right, Justin, who are you holding on this team?
For me, I'm holding DK Metcalf with where he is valued right around the range of a DJ Moore, Tank Dell, Rashee Rice, T. Higgins. I think that he's valued around a lot of other guys. Devontae Smith is also there, who I'm not sure are the ones on their team. And I still do believe that DK is the one on his team. I think his upside is a little bit capped, right? Like that hope we had of him being like a top 5 type of player. But wide receiver 9, 10 as his ceiling, pretty realistic to expect that as like the high range outcomes. Just needs a little bit more touchdown equity and upside that is definitely there with his size and big playability. Not interested in really pivoting to those other wide receivers in that range unless I'm like, if I'm firmly in a rebuild. Honestly, a lot of those guys are a lot older. The guys that I have to go to that are much younger, I don't necessarily believe are as solid of assets as him, like as sure of a thing at least. Like there's more risk in some of the other players. So I think, of course, there's situations where I'd sell him. Of course, there's situations where I'd buy him. But I think for the most part, he's just pretty fairly priced.
I think that's a fair argument. I think especially with the new offensive coordinator we've been talking about, he's going to help DK too, right? He's not the third wide receiver, so it's not like he was coming off the field. They're going to be more creative. They're going to open it up more, hopefully throw the ball down the field more like they did at Washington University, not the football team. So, yeah, I think that's fair. I don't really love DK myself, so I'm probably trying to sell him generally, but I don't think you should sell him for cheap. For sure. To the last place, Cardinals. JP, who are you buying?
I am buying Kyler Murray. And I mean, his price on Keep Trade Cut now is QB 11 behind Jaden Daniels. And I would take Kyler Murray over Jaden Daniels right now. I mean, Kyler Murray, he's a proven and immobile quarterback. And this is something from JD Zacharyson, who is also bullish on Kyler Murray this season. Since 2011, there have been 35 quarterbacks who hit 300 or more pass attempts while hitting 5 or more fantasy points per game via rushing. Of those 35, 20 ended up scoring 20 or more standard points per game. That's this 4-point passing touchdown. Last season, 20 fantasy points per game at quarterback would have ranked right there in QB3 territory. Like Kyler Murray's hit 4.9 fantasy points per game on the ground in all 5 seasons. Last year was the only one he was just below 5 at 4.9. I mean, he was coming off the torn ACL, but he was very good last year. He was a QB1 last year in points per game with the ACL and terrible offensive weapons. I mean, Michael Wilson was the wide receiver 1 most of the season with Hollywood Brown's injury. Now we saw Trey McBride emerge. Thank the Lord for him. And I think that he's probably going to be the number 2 target now because now they got Marvin Harrison Jr. Michael Wilson's entering year 2 as your wide receiver 2. You got Greg Dortch, who I think is decent. You got Trey Benson with some explosiveness. And obviously Trey McBride, who I think he's a future superstar, honestly. Maybe superstar is a little bit of a stretch, but I think he's a star at the tight end position. So I think QB 11, man, if I have a competing roster that needs a quarterback, Kyler Murray is my top target because I think he's just going to be consistent and also have a ceiling on a week-to-week basis because of that rushing, and the offense I think is just going to be a whole lot better.
So kind of narrowing it on, because he's also a little bit of a my guy for me, and I'd pay this. Are you paying 3 firsts if you can spare them for Kyler?
If I can spare him, yeah. If I have a QB need in 3 firsts, I imagine the rest of my team's ready to rock and roll. So yeah, I think that is the appropriate price, and I'd be willing to do that because I think he pushes you over the top.
Yeah, I mean, I think you might be able to try to get him for 2 firsts, couple seconds, something like that.
Yeah.
Go even lower. Who knows? 2 firsts and some threshold players, starters. You never know. Always start a little bit lower. Don't necessarily go right to the 3 firsts for the Kyler type of guy. Don't necessarily go right to the 3 firsts for, well, we'll get there later. But other quarterbacks in that range that are going to be a buy in this episode as well. But I just wanted to start there because that's always kind of my price point for an elite QB. Now, to buy him, are you willing to add a first to a guy like Drake May?
Yeah, I would. Although I love Drake May, it's still a risk.
And would you add 2 seconds to Jaden Daniels for the security?
I would. I think his ceiling's higher this year because I think the offense in Washington could be real bad. I would be willing to do that, especially if it's my own second as one of the 2.
What about a first? Late first?
I don't think I'm there, especially with where the market's at with Jaden Daniels somehow being higher. So no, I wouldn't do that right now.
All right, kind of getting some insight there. I think I agree with most of that as well. Certainly not paying a first on top of Jaden Daniels. Didn't think I could get you there. Just wanted to check on in.
Agreed. And David, who is your sell in the Cardinals?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. It was kind of harder than I expected to pick a sell on this offense. I like the studs and where they're priced. I think the offense is on its way up. So I'm going to go with the running back. Like James Conner, he's 30. He's got a little bit of a history of injuries. They drafted his long-term replacement, well, his likely long-term replacement. The offense should be better, but if we're being honest, it's still probably mediocre at best. All of these things kind of work against running backs in general. We don't like running backs in general, so we're going to sell him. If I can tear down to like Zach Moss or Devin Singletary, like we always talk about, that's great. If I need points for running back, I'm okay holding, but I just think you might be able to get a little plus to have basically the same production. So I would explore trading him.
Yeah, I don't blame you. With that injury history and the presence of Trey Benson, it definitely scares me for this season already, and his future is already in flux. So would you sell James Conner and a third for a second?
On some teams, yes, but not on all teams. If I project him as a starter or at least a top bye week fill-in or something, then I'll probably hang on to him. But yeah, I'd probably do that on most teams.
What about for Jalen Polk?
That depends on where I'm at for sure. If I'm rebuilding, I'll take Polk. If I'm competing, I'll keep Conner.
Last one for you, Jalen Warren or James Conner?
I'll take Warren. He got a couple more years in his tires.
Yeah, he's going to move on from the Steelers and eventually be the running back for the Cardinals, just like Connor did. So you're getting the replacement.
That's not good for my Trey Benson shares. All right, Justin, last one for this team. Who is your hold?
I am looking to hold Trey McBride. So when I look up his keep trade cut price points, he's behind Devin Hn, Rome Odunze, barely ahead of like a Tua. And I prefer Trey to all of those names just because of what I think he can do over the long term. Of course, there's a chance I regret Rome. I know Rome, you guys love him. There's a lot of competition there. And just what I think Trey can do, what I've seen him do. Now, that is a non-tight end premium. And a tight end premium, he is pretty steeply priced on keep trade cut. So I think just because like of where he's priced, being a bunch of guys that like, I can see it going either way, but I probably prefer it to him. But also just knowing what the real league markets are, which is every time I've tried to reach out to a Trey McBride owner, they're very hyped about him. It's hard to buy him. I think that kind of fits into that hold. Like I prefer him over the players in the range there, and people that have him don't really want to sell him. Is if I have him, I'm holding. With where he's priced, I think I don't really want to get what I can get for him. So easy hold for me.
I think the guy is really, really good. Once he took over for Zach Ertz, his yards per route run was one of the best actually in the last 10 years. and I think it was like week 8 on. So yeah, I think he is a guy who's going to be incredible.
Yeah, I love Trey McBride as a hold there. So good call, Justin. Let's go ahead and move on to the AFC with your defending Super Bowl champions, the Kansas City Chiefs. JP, who you buying?
I'm buying Hollywood Brown here on the Chiefs, and he's wide receiver 54 on Keep Trade Cut, which is a lot lower than where it was pre-injury. Which the injury, it's only probably going to be 1 week long. I think it's kind of on the fence whether he was going to play week 1. I think they've already ruled him out. Essentially, they're at least leaning that way. But it's a Thursday night game, so I'm not surprised. I expect him to be back, though, for the rest of the season from week 2 on. Maybe he misses the second week, but I think he probably is back. But he's behind Dontavian Wicks, Josh Downs, Khalil Shakir right now. And those guys, yeah, they're a little bit younger, but man, I really, really prefer Marquise Brown this season. And I think he could have a pretty darn good season with the Chiefs, who I think are going to bounce back. He's got Patrick Mahomes as his darn quarterback. And I think that Kelsey might not play quite as much. I think they might start to limit his reps a little bit, although I think he's still going to be productive this season. But Hollywood Brown, he's only 27 still. I believe he's probably going to be top 2 there with Rashee Rice and himself, obviously, as the 2 leading receivers for the team. And I think with this 1-year deal, I think it could resurrect some of his value because personally, I think Andy Reid is going to use him in a proper way. And I know he's a limited receiver, but Andy Reid, he knows how to optimize his players. He's one of the top 5 best play callers in the league. So even if he's not obviously like a top 15, top 20 receiver, I think he's still going to be plenty productive and has some really, really big weeks since he's playing with Patrick Mahomes, because wide receiver 54, I mean, sheesh.
Yeah, that's definitely a pretty cheap price for someone who might be one of Mahomes' leading targets. So you paying a mid-second, 25?
I definitely would consider it. Yeah.
What if you had to add a third?
A late third, I think I would. If it's an earlier one, no.
Right, what about just an early second?
An early second, I think I could aim higher. Maybe our boys, Christian Kirk, Deontay Johnson.
I think that's fair. That's probably right around fair price for him.
All right, Justin, who are we selling on the Chiefs?
Sorry, I'm just looking over the show sheet, and I think there's an error here, guys. We didn't have Xavier Worthy as the Chiefs spy, and that's my opinion. That's egregious. So I'm stepping down podcast going forward. But I guess so it's been fun. I will see you guys. Wrong answer, JP, but I guess I have to sell someone now. And I'm shockingly going to be selling Isaiah Pacheco here. First time we've sold an RB on this show. So Pacheco, he's ranked currently on Keep Trade Cut above Drake May. Kind of a joke to me. Above Jonathan Brooks. On a competing team, I'd understand keeping Pacheco over Brooks if I'm competing, but in a vacuum, that's to me fake news. Almost as egregious as not having Xavier Worthy as the buy, but it's okay. It's fine. It's fine, JP. Just basically when I'm looking at the players he's priced around, like it's pretty clear and evident to me that I should be able to get a 25 first for him. Anytime I can get a 25 first for a running back of this caliber, because he's like literally ranked right behind a 26 early first on Keep Trade Cut. I can get a 25 first for him per Keep Trade Cut values. I've gotten a 25 first for him this offseason, and I'm taking that to the bank and I'm running every time.
Yeah, this guy hasn't been particularly efficient on a good offense, and we're expecting him to make a jump that we haven't quite seen from him, honestly. So I think he is a really appropriate sell for being that highly valued. But would you sell him for a first if you have to throw in 2/3?
If I have the thirds to pay, I probably am asking for some running backs back that I think have a shot at starting, then trying to see if I can get creative with it. But in a vacuum, I'm willing to pay that to get it done if I have to.
Let's say that you want to get a QB3. Would you sell him for Bryce Young and a third?
I don't really like the question. I'm not a huge. I'm hot and I'm cold. I'm yes, then I'm no with Bryce Young all offseason. I do like him as a buy. I think that he's not that flexible or liquid though, because I think we have to see him do something before I can get him. So I think I'd prefer Pacheco because I think he's more liquid than Bryce Young. Honestly, I think more other teams want him as a trade piece in deals than Bryce Young potentially. So I think I might hold Pacheco just because of how hard it can be to move Bryce Young right now.
Fair enough. Would you move him for Jared Goff straight up?
Duh.
All right, last one. Bo Nix.
Yeah, because the opposite of Bryce Young, Bo Nix is very liquid and flexible at this point, and just a quarterback is a safer store of value.
I agree. He's way more liquid because we have not seen him yet, and people are still interested to see what he can do.
He could be anything.
He could be Bryce Young. He could be Drew Brees.
All right, and David, who is your hold on these Super Bowl champion, defending, repeating Kansas City Chiefs?
Yeah, I'm going with Rashee Rice here. Most of it is due to the legal issues he's brought upon himself. I think that's holding his value down pretty low. It's recovered a little bit since the incident happened. I think that's mostly because now it seems like maybe his suspension won't happen this year. I'll be honest, whether it's this year or next year, as long as it's not during the fantasy playoffs, I don't care that much. He's going to produce before it. He's going to produce after it. He's going to gain value after it, no matter what. And he's tied to the best quarterback in football. They're about to lose Kelsey, or we don't know when he's going to retire, but we assume soon. He's certainly old enough to take a dip any year. Holding him is the move. I think holding him was the move back when this all broke. And the people that kind of sold pretty low. So I'm going to hold on to him and let the thing play out and play him as long as I can. And then when the suspension is announced, we'll deal with it later.
The hold was much more important at the time of the incident. People who sold them, they really took a little bit of a bath on it. Even now, though, I still do agree that with where he's priced and the unknown, the uncertainty, and what that does to the ability to move him, definitely agree, currently a hold. And moving on to the Las Vegas Raiders. David, who is your buy?
This one was kind of by default. I don't really like where Zamir White's priced. Devontae Adams pretty expensive. Nobody else on this team except my buy is even worth considering a buy. Gotta go with Brock Bowers. He's an incredible tight end prospect. He's probably going to be their main offensive weapon going forward once Devontae's done. It looks like they're actually moving him around a ton. There's definitely some uncertainty about his quarterback going forward. It looks like they plan to use him the right way, so I'm excited for him. I'm choosing to be positive about him. And again, who else are you trying to buy on this team?
I got no answer to that one. But since we're going to be buying him because everyone else is a little bit of doo-doo butter, what are we paying for him? So obviously, I assume a random 25 first that you're willing to pay that. Are you willing to pay that in a non-tight end premium league, though?
Yeah, as long as I need a tight end.
All right. Are you adding a second to that 25 first in a non-tight end premium?
In a non-tight end premium, probably not.
In a tight end premium, a first and 2 seconds? Let's say 2 tight end premium.
I was going to say, if it's an aggressive premium, maybe. It would just depend on my draft stock there. If I have enough and the first is likely playoffs, then yeah, I think I would. That's probably the line, though, to be honest.
So not willing to approach 2 firsts and a 2 tight end premium?
Not yet. I got to see it first.
Are we going Pitts or Bowers at this point? Asking for a friend.
It depends on where I'm at. If I'm competing this year, I probably got to go Pitts. Otherwise, I'm going to go Bowers.
All right, let me just send out some trade offers to my little brother real quick.
All right, and JP, who are you selling from the Raiders?
Shocker. We got a running back here, but this is somebody that I really think has been a big sell for quite a while, and that's Zamir White. I just don't see a lot of upside from him this season, and he is currently on keep trade cut. He's RB27. He was higher, but I still would sell him at that price because last year there's a lot of excitement just based on what he did when Josh Jacobs was out. But context is important. When you look back at those 4 games where he was producing at a decent level there, one of the games was against Jarrett Stidham and the Broncos. Another was against Minshew. One of them was against the Chargers where they won 63-21. So those 3 matchups, they weren't that difficult. They were more conducive for running because obviously they were in a close game and they were winning. And then they had a game where they won against the Chiefs. The Chiefs were slumping at the time, and the Raiders were rallying behind their new head coach there, Antonio Pierce, because they just did not want to be playing behind Josh McDaniels there. But that's just really interesting because they won 3 out of 4 of those games. The one that they lost was against the Colts and Minshew, but it was a close one. They lost by 3. But their over-under win total is 6.5 in the betting markets. This is not a team that I think is going to be winning a lot of games, and I think this is a running back that you only want on a team that's going to be winning a lot of games, being in the red zone a lot. And that's something that's going to be true because I think he's going to have to rely on touchdowns on a bad team because he's never been a player that we've seen catch a lot of passes in college in the NFL. And Dylan Labe, he's a really good pass catcher. There's been some decent reviews out of camp from him. I think he's going to be the primary pass catching running back. If you're betting on a non-pass catching running back that we haven't seen in a big role on a bad team, I just think that there's bust potential. I've made this parallel before with Mike Davis when he went to the Falcons. I mean, you've seen Lamar Miller, like he was efficient, then he got put into a big role and he was not the same player too. I just don't think that this guy's going to be that great this year. And even if he does hit, he's just like a mid to low in RB2.
But he's kind of priced as a mid to low in RB2. And I think that's not that unreasonable for him to hit RB2, RB3 fringe. That's where he's priced at. So like I kind of think he does have a little bit more upside if this offense does surprise a little bit more than we think it might, if they have some fun games and just kind of the volume is way a little bit. So I kind of want to push back a little bit because if he was up in the RB20-ish range, like 20, 21, 22 still, then I think I get a little bit more. But RB27 is a pretty low price, I think, for a starting running back on what I would project to be a top 25 offense. I don't think it's going to be a bottom of the pack offense with the weapons that they have there.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, but a lot of the running backs, even in the range, I just think have a lot more upside. And like I said, if he hits, like, which isn't if, I think he's being priced pretty close to his ceiling. But I understand some people are believing more in the Raiders. I just personally don't. I think it's going to be a bad team, and I just don't. I haven't seen anything special out of him.
How many times do I have to tell you about the Gardner Minshew workout video to Creed playing in the background before you get excited, JP? I just don't know what more I can do here. I really don't.
Well, that video makes me think that Gardner Minshew's got that high T, and he's going to run the ball and not check it down to his running back. So, it made me even more out on Zamir White.
Sorry, and what are we looking to take for him then, JP? Even though David's supposed to be talking this, I've just hijacked this section. So let me just ask.
I was just letting you go, buddy.
I like to argue. You know how much I love running back. So I just had to fight on this one. Are you taking a random 25-second for Zamir White then?
Yes, I would smash that. And I would turn that second into a better running back if I needed to.
Okay, I just recently, last week, post JJ McCarthy injury, traded Sam Darnold. I didn't need him. He was like my QB4 for Zamir White. Are you making that trade?
Sam Darnold for Zamir White? Man, I mean, especially with where the market is, I think I'd keep Zamir White.
I got me some Zamir White in that trade. So, okay, so you wouldn't trade him for a Sam Darnold type?
No, it's pretty low.
Are you taking 3/3 or Zamir White?
I think I would, because I'm not even 100% sure that he's going to be getting all the carries with. I think Alexander Madison might even mix in, and maybe he's this year's Alexander Madison. That's another parallel I've heard. I just really don't believe. If that was all I could get, then I would certainly consider it. If I'm competing, maybe I hold, but in a rebuild, I'm definitely taking that.
So we real low. Okay, good to know. You're wrong,
I'm real.
but it's fine. First you didn't buy Xavier Worthy. Now this, JP, we're feuding. That's all, but it's okay.
Nothing new.
We've never argued before.
All right, Justin, who are you holding on the Raiders?
So I'm going to be holding Devontae Adams just because he's valued well below a random 25 first. He's in the price range of a Mike Evans. Some players in there, Jaden Reed, Jordan Addison, I definitely would pivot to if I was not competing. No problem going young there. But just because of the upside of, do I project him to be the wide receiver 1 overall this year? Absolutely not. But if he was, would anyone be shocked? I think the realistic outcome is wide receiver 8 to 14 is a pretty reasonable outcome for him if he's healthy all year. And with the price that I could get selling him being nowhere near the value of the production, I think is pretty fair to expect from just what of an amazing player he is. It's a pretty easy hold unless, of course, I am rebuilding for him.
Yeah, when you're valued below Bryce Young and you're still that productive, yeah, I think he is a good hold. I've been a little bit lower on him, but his price has come down from even when I was low on him. So I do think he's a perfectly acceptable hold. An underdog, he's still being treated like a top 20, borderline top 15 guy. So yeah, I would gladly just ride it out when his value is down that low. All right, moving on to the Denver Broncos. David, give me your buy.
Yeah, this is another tough team to pick a buy on. I'm going to go with Javonte Williams in October. I think October 2nd, he'll be 2 years out of that brutal knee injury. I know he didn't look great last year, but this is probably a shared assumption by a lot of people. It seems like he came back a little early. I think that affected how we all perceive him. So if he gets that explosiveness back, he's in Sean Payton's offense that has been friendly to running backs historically, especially because people have loved him in the past. I think he was as high as RB2 at some point in his career. If all that goes well for him, he's going to see a huge rise in value. And now I know there's a lot of other players priced around him that have higher floors, but we like to bet on upside, and I think that's what Javonte is.
I know we're going to say no here. We're not paying a late first. Are we offering 2 seconds?
I could see paying 2 seconds on some teams, but
early second next year.
I think I could do that.
Early second and a third.
I think the early second is probably the line there.
All right, owning it on a price there. I think I'm pretty close to agreeing with you there. It's an uncomfortable price point, but
buying running backs is always uncomfortable, isn't it?
Is that why we've been selling them so much?
That is why. All right, Justin, give me a sell who is not a running back, oddly enough.
You know what? This has got to be a first for the podcast. Actually, I'd have to look through the other show sheets, but I'm pretty sure we sold some other non-running back players at some point. Now, this is not a must sell. This is a sell with a caveat that I would prefer a random first to Bo Nix. So if you can get yourself a first, recently I had to add a Javon Baker in a start 9 to get a 25 first for Bo Nix, which to me is pretty reasonable. I had a lot of wide receivers. I actually needed to cut some players anyways to get down, so I was happy to liquidate that for the first, but I'm not taking anything less than a first for Bo Nix. I want to be pretty clear on that. Just a young quarterback. We think he's going to be a starter for several years. Is he going to be any good? We don't know, but a starter for several years, and the way quarterbacks hold value, and he doesn't need to flash that much, just some potential to probably increase in value. It's a pretty simple hold unless I can get that first and the flexibility of the first. But I am very happy to re-roll him for a 25 first, unless it's.
Would you pay Bo Nix in a second for Tua?
Yeah, happily.
For Drake May?
Yeah, happily.
And Goff is the only other one right above him.
Yeah, again, I'd probably add 2 seconds to get to Goff or Tua, happily. I don't know if I'd add 2 seconds to get to May, but I probably would. Yeah.
Yeah, I do agree. Now, what about Will Levis? Who would you rather have straight up?
Probably Bo Nix, just because the number of opportunities he's going to have to mess up are a lot higher than what Levis has.
I'll give you one cross-positional one. Would you rather have Bo Nix or James Cook?
I swear to God, I thought you were going to say Jameson Williams. I was going to come over to Florida and smack you. That one's just dependent. If I'm competing, I could definitely see taking like a James Cook type if I needed running back, and it's the best option I could get. But in a vacuum, absolutely would rather take Bo Nix, because one of them is more fungible, flexible. It's just a better asset to have in general as a young quarterback than a running back that not everyone is excited about.
Yeah, I didn't ask
I
you
want a first, JP.
A first?
I want a first.
Yeah, I want a first too. Yeah, I didn't ask you wide receiver cross positionally because I think it's hard to get a wide receiver. But I will ask, if we just go below him on keep trade cut, would you trade him for Ladd?
100%.
Fair enough.
And JP, who is your hold on this? No longer Broncos country. Broncos.
Well, it is a Bronco, of course, here with Jaleel McLaughlin. And I want to read a tweet. I don't know if you guys saw this from Scott Barrett, but talking about Sean Payton in his 18-year history as an NFL coach. Sean Payton's RB2, the RB who did not lead the backfield in carries, has averaged more than 16.5 fantasy points per game 5 times. For perspective, Travis Etienne ranked as RB7 last year with 16.4. Collectively across all 18 seasons, Payton's RB2 averages 13.8 fantasy points per game. That's where James Cook was last year at RB19. So I think Jaleel McLaughlin, he has a pretty decent chance to be productive, even if Javonte Williams is productive. And I was curious with Samaje Perine being gone, what it would mean if he took over Samaje Perine's receiving workload. Now, this is just assuming that Jaleel McLaughlin stays at 76 carries and you just add on to his 31 receptions. If you added on Samaje Perine's 50 receptions and 455 yards, which maybe is reasonable. I don't know, maybe not. But then again, he's probably going to see some more carries. But he would have finished as a top 20 running back last year. Now, points per game probably a little bit lower, but this guy he's priced pretty darn low, and I think he could give you RB3 production at least. He doesn't even have to be your starter. You're not paying starter prices for him, even flex prices for him. And I think that he's going to be a guy that during bye weeks you're going to be pretty thankful that you have him. And if Javonte goes down, maybe he sees a small uptick. I just think that this team is going to be losing a lot of games, and I think he's going to be the third down guy. And Sean Payton he's always one of the league leaders in pass attempts to his running backs. So we know that this receiving core on the Broncos is not very good either. And at RB 43, I'll gladly hold him at that price.
Yeah, I almost picked him as my buy even. Big fan of his. I am not looking to sell him, that's for sure. So I think good call on the hold. And let's go ahead and move to the last team we will be talking about today, the Los Angeles Chargers. Justin, who you buying?
Now, if you've been listening to this podcast, this is going to come as a shock to you, but Justin Herbert, it's exclusively because we have the same first name. That's the only reason why. Also because he's a phenomenal NFL quarterback with a long-term contract of job security. I think we're going to start to now actually have good coaching there, security, and consistency from that. Don't know how great Ladd's going to be. I kind of believe in him a little bit as an asset as a player, but I definitely do believe that it's only going to get better from this year, the weapons that they have around him. I still think he's actually going to be pretty solid this year, even with the weapons around them. And his price is ridiculously low. QB 12. He's right around Tyreek Hill, Dalton Kincaid, Brock Bowers on keep trade cut. Are you kidding me? I mean, he's just above those guys, but right around them, he's a screaming buy to me. And it's not even oh my gosh. I actually I'm going to go send out some offers. David, you have him in a couple leagues. Do you want to sell me him? What do I have to pay you?
Send me an offer, man. I got him in Megala Dynasty. I'll sell him.
What do I have there? I have Lamar, and is it Hurts there? I think I'm okay.
No, you need him. Trust me. All right, so let's talk about price. I was going to start a little lower, but because he came straight at JP with his Kyler buy, I'm going there too. You paying 3 firsts if you have them?
Yeah, of course. I mean, with where the market is, I'm going to try to go a little bit lower. I'm going to try to go a couple firsts, couple seconds, something like that, or see if I can get some credit for some things that are worth the first, right? Can I get a first valuation for a Bo Nix and a Rashad White and throw on a first and get to 3 firsts that way? That's what I'm trying to do. But if I have to throw 3 actual liquid firsts out to get him, and I happen to spend 100%. Like, he's worth it to me. And JP, who is your sell on this team?
Now, this was a little bit tough because outside of Herbert and McConkey, there's not anybody else ranked inside the top 140 on keep trade cut on this team, even though we expect it to not even be like a terrible offense. But I had to pick somebody, so I'm going to go ahead and pick J.K. Dobbins here. And it's mostly just a bet against the injury that has to fight against here. I mean, the Achilles injury, that used to be a death knell for a career. Now it's still even difficult to come back from. I mean, we saw Cam Akers in the preseason look pretty decent, but if we're actually looking at real games, Cam Akers last year, he was on the Rams the beginning of the season, as you guys probably remember. He had a full year to recover. I don't know if you guys remember, he actually came back at the end of the 2022 season, right in the playoffs, although he was super inefficient. So even with that extra time, the beginning of last year, week 1, I didn't realize it was this bad. I know it was bad, but he had 22 carries for 29 yards. It was bad. After that week, they immediately traded him away for a 6-7 swap. And this is in season for a team that, was trying to contend. They just traded him for some draft capital, 6-7 swap. So that's pretty rough. And J.K. Dobbins, he's coming back from this Achilles injury as well. We've seen him struggle with injury time and time again. There is some upside. Like, I do get that, but it's just so hard to bank on a guy coming off an Achilles injury who's had the ACL injuries, just brutal injury, one after another. It's just hard to see if he still has that explosiveness and athleticism and explosiveness. We care about him more at running back than any other position. So it's just really hard for me to hold on to this player and think that I'm going to get some good production this year.
No, I hear you. There isn't quite a bit of hype there. I think it's viable. I think you could get it. You're taking a random third?
Yeah, and I actually did sell him for random third. And I think some of the hype is him speaking, which we've seen him lie before about him being 100% ready to go.
That hasn't happened in like a year, though. Like, he's changed. Are you taking 2/4 for him at this point?
Probably not. Even though it's a tough bet, like on the injury, like I said, 2/4, it just doesn't have much value.
Yeah, no, I think you can get that third you're looking to sell him for. I think I'd be taking that as well. I understand the appeal of having him, but I do think it's just the realistic. I mean, that's a brutal injury. You're right. And I believe it could have been the Fantasy Footballers podcast where they were talking about how this is one of the only injuries with an ACL, you can medically be cleared to be just like where you were before. But with a Achilles, you're not actually able to really get back all of the explosiveness. Like, you cannot be the same that you were before you tore the Achilles, right? It's not like you can't actually recover quite in the same way that you can from a lot of other injuries. I'm also just and we haven't seen anyone really do it, right? Deontay Foreman is probably like the poster child of it, and he's come back to solid. Like, that's the best case scenario we've ever seen, is coming back to solid, right?
It took him multiple years too. It wasn't just 1 year of recovery. We didn't see him for a couple of years before he finally made a reappearance. And like you said, he's just been fine. All right, David, who are you holding on the Chargers?
This team was a little difficult. I agree with you, JP. I think Justin had the very easy selection here with Herbert as the buy.
Thank you.
I'm going to go with Lad McConkey. I think his hype has cooled a little since the draft. He's still got that very, very clear path to be Herbert's wide receiver 1. I liked him as a prospect. I think, he wasn't a perfect prospect by any means, but if he can stay healthy and earn that wide receiver 1 role, the upside is huge. And I think worst case, he's a mid wide receiver 2, but could even be a back end wide receiver 1 next year if he actually establishes that role. So I'm not trying to sell him low. I'm going to hold on to him and see how it plays out.
Yeah, it's a little discouraging that he had the injury in the offseason, but it just seems like he's going to be the clear-cut wide receiver 1 on this team, at least from a reception total. And yeah, honestly, I think you can probably bank on him this year. So yeah, I would be holding McConkey any place I have him.
Can't disagree with that. Definitely a lot of useful insight there of our opinions, but we always want to also include what's actually happening in real leagues as well. For that, of course, we will go to dynastydaddy.com, where we have pulled trades from real leagues involving all of our buys, sells, or at least some of them, buys, sells, and holds, so that we can actually give you some context on what's happening and our opinions on that, because we still want to share at least some of our opinions. Start off with JP, a 12-team start 11 PPR half tight end premium. Brian Thomas Jr. in a 25-second or Brandon Ayuk?
I think you could answer that question for me. It's Brandon Ayuk. I think that you actually could get this done because Brian Thomas has been getting steamed up. So, I mean, obviously you took it from a real trade. But yeah, I'm going to take Brandon Ayuk because we've seen him be great. And yeah, he's a little bit older, but I just think his upside is immense, as I've obviously talked about. All right, Justin, are you taking Isaiah Pacheco or Kenneth Walker in a third?
So it's a start 10, full PPR, which to me doesn't do a whole lot when we're talking Pacheco or Walker. So I'm taking Kenneth Walker in a third. If you put the third on either side of this, I think I'm taking that side. It's really, I don't know who's better. So give me the third.
Agreed.
And David, 12-team start 10, full PPR, JSN or Will Levis in a 25-second?
If I have a quarterback to spare, I think I could do that for JSN, but it's not often that I have a quarterback to spare. So I would imagine most times I'm going to take Levis in the second. Like I said, if Levis is like my fourth QB or something, or I have another QB lower than him on my bench, I could pay that to get to JSN.
What if he's your third quarterback?
Probably not, unless my two were elite, then maybe, but probably not.
No, I like Levis as a third quarterback, even if you have two elite quarterbacks, because then you have that shot. However improbable it is, like I've heard a lot of people really outline the path there is not really incredibly viable, but he's toolsy. He could be really good for fantasy, potentially, if he puts it together. They did a lot of things to help him out from the offensive line and weapons. Like, I don't hate him as a third quarterback, so it's kind of it's a tough trade to make on either side. I can see both sides for sure. JP, coming back to you. 12-team, start 10, half PPR, 1 tight end premium. Zamir White or Charbonnet and a 25 third.
Man, we're really stretching it here on Zamir White, but you know how low I am. And honestly, I think I might even take Charbonnet in the third, and I think you guys might take the other side. But part of my rationale here is that Zach Charbonnet, I think he has a ceiling to be a top 12 running back this season. He has that contingent upside. I don't think Zamir White, there's no injury that can happen ahead of him that gives him more upside. Only thing is if his offense is just way, way better than we expect, which might be a little bit better than we expect. But I'll take the third in Charbonnet, even though I think that's pretty contrarian.
Okay.
So this 12-team start 10 PPR 1 tight end premium. Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert and Luke McCaffrey.
I feel personally targeted. Who put this show sheet together over Herbert and McCaffrey? Just because the trade market delta between Burrow and Herbert, I don't know if I could get a first to tear down from them, but I think it's pretty close to that. And as much as I like Luke McCaffrey, he's certainly not worth a first. I think it's pretty easy to get Herbert and a second and a third for Burrow. Not in every league, but it's possible. So the difference between the two is more than a Luke McCaffrey. So as much as I love you, Luke, I'm going to take Burrow here. David, that's mean. Now maybe I can get you back here. Possibly. You also picked this trade, so maybe not. 12-team, start 10, full PPR, Kenneth Walker or James Conner in a 25-second.
Yeah, this one's like right on the line for me of those 2 seconds for Kenneth Walker we talked about. I think I'm probably going to hold Connor in the second unless I'm really uneasy with my RB room. But even then, does Kenneth Walker make me that much more confident? Not really. So I'm going to keep the flexibility of that second and go shopping for a better running back later on in the season after a few weeks have passed.
Yeah, I definitely can understand that as well. I'd prefer just a name that I thought had more certainty than James Conner might in the second half of the season, but it's a running back. None of them have certainty, right? That's why you got the 25-second to buy something more certain in the second half of the season, right?
Exactly.
All right, so thank you for joining us for another episode of the Data Construction Podcast. We hope this was helpful for you as it was for us. Please remember to like and subscribe wherever you listen or review. And from all of us here at the Data Construction Podcast, until next time.